documentation. So for the Thomas test, for iliopsoas, you're measuring hip extension. So any deficit, so if they're not able to get to 0, it's going to be a negative number because you're measuring extension. Okay? Tanner actually had 3 degrees of extension for this test, so this would be a positive number. You can measure the Thomas test at the hip, either with a tape measure from the posterior thigh down to the table as close to the knee as possible, or you can measure goniometrically like we would measure that joint motion for the hip. For the rectus femoris, we're measuring knee flexion, and while 90 degrees is normal, we're still going to just document his knee flexion angle. Okay, so we wrote knee flexion here, and we wrote the angle is 77.
So for both of those, once you get them in the test position, you don't move them at all.
Right,
Yes.
right. Now for prone iliopsoas length, well, first of all, if you're going to do the prone length test, you're going to start with rectus femoris first. You are going to monitor the anterior iliac crest. You are flexing the knee until you get to a position where that comes off the table. Okay? Now for Tanner, we were at 52 or 58 degrees. This is also documenting knee flexion, so that's going to be a positive number. For iliopsoas, you're going to have the knees somewhat bent. Usually you would use the angle that you had here, or 90 degrees. And then you would extend the hip until you felt movement at the pelvis. Okay? If that person is, their ASIS is already off the table, then you would measure that amount of hip flexion and document it as a deficit in extension. Okay? So that would be a negative number if that person was already flexed when you put them in prone. Some of you, that will be the case. Okay, some of you are pretty tight for your hip flexors. For Ober test, it's just going to be positive or negative, depending on whether or not it can go below the plane of the pelvis and it drops down, that's negative. If it stays up as you try to lower it down, that's going to be positive. And then we'll talk about these on Thursday. Okay?